Hey, how's it going? Another episode of My Life as a Critic. I am professional film critic Sean Patrick. On this show, I talk about my career, and I look back on movies that I've written about, and then I rewatch the movie from a slightly older perspective and see if I feel any differently about it, or how things have changed or evolved over the time since the movie came out. So this episode is going to be a difficult one for me because I have to, there's something about this movie that has changed in the 10 years since it came out. It was a blockbuster of its time. It was a movie that a lot of audience members liked. A lot of critics didn't like it. And in the past 10 years since this film came out, it's taken on taken on kind of a pop culture reputation for being a movie that is everything that's wrong with the modern romantic comedy, essentially. The Holiday, with Kate Winslet, Cameron Diaz, Jude Law, Jack Black, is a movie that has come to be hated. There's just no other way to put it. The film came to be despised by a lot of people in the past 10 years. I know people who still talk about hating this movie. That's how much they don't like it. And I can recall when I wrote this review back in 2006 for smart-popcorn.com, that I can recall a few people kind of looking at me sideways when I said that, when I gave it a positive review, because critics we tend to not be allowed to like anything that we like. That's a weird way of saying it, but especially when it comes to a movie like this, we're supposed to be, we're supposed to maintain our pretensions and tell you that, we don't enjoy things that most people enjoy. But I did enjoy this movie, and let's talk about that fact directly here. This is my review from 2006 of The Holiday. Director Nancy Meyers is the master of fluffy Hollywood love stories. Her Something's Gotta Give and What Women Want are big star vehicles that indulge heavily in Hollywood glamour and fantasy romance. Her latest film, The Holiday, is her best effort yet at bringing romantic fantasy to the screen. Teaming Cameron Diaz and Jude Law, Meyers crafts a couple of more photogenic than an entire J.C. Penney catalog, and a dream romance that audiences cannot help but eat up like movie popcorn. Warm, buttery, and oh so simple, The Holiday is the kind of lighthearted and lightheaded fluff that is the perfect holiday escape. I said that. Wow, I'm embarrassed about that. I mean, I liked this movie, but man, was I writing poster quotes? Was I writing poster quotes? Oh man. In a small town just outside of London, Iris, Kate Winslet, is working through her company Christmas party when her boss makes a big announcement. The man that Iris has been seeing for nearly 3 years is getting engaged, but not to her. Devastated, Iris needs to get out of town before she does something awful. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Amanda, Cameron Diaz, is at the end of her relationship with Ethan, played by Ed Burns. In the most cliched fashion, Ethan has been sleeping with his much younger secretary. After throwing him out and leveling him with an impressive right cross, Amanda wants out of L.A. for the holidays. Luck and chance leads Amanda to a website advertising home exchange. This is where Amanda meets Iris, and the two offer each other the chance to escape their sad states by switching homes. In London, Amanda moves into Iris's cozy rural cabin and finds herself visited in the middle of the night by Graham, Jude Law, Iris's brother. Slightly drunk, Graham charms his way right into Amanda's bed, and she takes the chance on some guilt-free vacation sex with a good-looking guy she feels she'll never see again. Of course, we already know that nothing could be that simple, and the two are soon romancing. Back in Los Angeles, Iris makes a match of her own, but not the one you might expect. Iris's new neighbor is Arthur, played by Eli Wallach, an old Hollywood screenwriter who Iris befriends when he gets lost trying to find his house. Iris helps him home and is invited for dinner and an education in film classics. Jack Black does eventually show up as Miles, a more age-appropriate love interest for Iris, but it is Wallach's Arthur who steals the show. The fun of The Holiday is watching great-looking actors indulge in lives of frivolous excess for our amusement. Escaping into their perfect, pretty lives is a fun little distraction, like a cookie or a chocolate bar. Too many film critics get uptight about movies like The Holiday or really anything directed by Nancy Meyers. For my money, movies like The Holiday are just a treat. Beautiful to look at, easy to forget, fun to catch in late-night movie reruns, and when nothing else is on. Movies don't have to reflect reality or present some grand metaphor. Sometimes movies just have to entertain, and that's what The Holiday is all about. Pure entertainment. This is against everything I think I've ever said in my life. Well, not really. I mean, if I keep it to the specific context of this film, I mean, I'm not. When I go outside of the context of this specific film, I sound like an idiot because I do want to be challenged by the movies that I see, and I do want bigger ideas, and I want movies to strive to be something more. I don't want to turn my brain off at the movies, but apparently, 10 years ago, I was perfectly willing to turn my brain off for Nancy Meyers. Nevertheless. Glamour is an oddity in this day and age. As we continue the review. Glamour is an oddity in this day and age. There is an overabundance of glamour off the screen. Flashbulbs pop at movie premieres, outside nightclubs, and even at grocery stores in Hollywood. On the other hand, glamour on the screen is not merely absent, but it's often frowned upon, especially by quote-unquote serious artists. That is why, for my money, a movie like The Holiday is such a wonderful sight. The Holiday transports audiences back to a time when glamorous stars were allowed to be glamorous stars. Is it frivolous? Absolutely. That's part of the fun. The Holiday is a candy-coated glamour production in which people are all unbelievably good-looking, locations are lifted from picture postcards, and situations are resolved in 90 minutes with laughing and dancing and hugs. Some people find their escapist fun in Hobbits or The Force, others in watching Jude Law romance Cameron Diaz. Why is one more worthy than the other? That's a good point. I'm going to stop right there and say that I think I made a really strong point there. I mean, why would The Hobbit be considered more appropriate escapist fun than something like The Holiday? I mean, they're equally fantastical in their ways, in some ways, just because The Holiday is kind of this outsized romantic fantasy. But why is one more important than the other? Just because The Hobbit is kind of has is gritty or it has a literary background? The Hobbit is pretty lame to me. So Hobbits, of course, when I talked about Hobbits in this review, I was talking about Lord of the Rings, obviously, but The Hobbit hadn't even been made by that time. Back to the review. There are many movies like The Holiday, and I've been quite hard on many of them. What separates The Holiday is the combination of chemistry and familiarity that Nancy Meyers specializes in. Assembling an all-star cast of Hollywood luminaries, Meyers indulges in romantic fantasies that, while they aren't original by any stretch, they are more appealing and better looking than most similar fantasies. Nancy Meyers' skill is in essentially regifting romantic cliches. Meyers wraps a beautiful new bow on familiar romantic stories. The key is that she does it better than other directors, and with better actors. This was a skill that was highly valued back in the movie factory days of the studio system and is now frowned upon in the post-auteur era. Sorry. There is nothing remotely important about The Holiday, and that's part of its charm. This is pure glamorous escapism that basks in the glow of star power and fantasy romance. I don't want every movie to be as unimportant as The Holiday. However, from time to time, the kind of movie that Nancy Meyers makes is a welcome respite from gritty action, bloody horror, and even from the importance of great film drama. And that was my review of The Holiday from 2006, and I guess I can kind of stand by that. I mean, obviously the early part, the poster quote part, where it was a little much, but I'm not necessarily wrong when I look at it like that, because there is something to be said for a movie that is just pure fun, and I can see that at the time I certainly thought The Holiday was pure fun. I'm going to stop now and actually watch it again and see if it remains fun. I mean, we'll see. I knew I didn't like Leap Year when I started watching it, but I didn't realize I would turn around and start hating that film so much. So we'll see how The Holiday goes this time. So here's the part where I'm supposed to get all mad and say, oh, I hate this movie. This movie isn't any good. I hate this movie. Stupid movie when it's beautiful people and settings and fantasy romance, whatever. Well, I'm sorry, hipsters. I don't hate this movie, okay? I know this became a symbol and is remaining a symbol of everything people hate about modern movies, about modern movie romance. It's not real enough. It's not imaginative enough. It's fine. Those are fair arguments. It's not real, and it's not imaginative. It's recycled cliches, but it's well recycled cliches. Nancy Meyers is a very professional director who knows how to elicit the exact response that she wants from the audience, and she knows exactly what her audience wants, and there's nothing truly wrong with that. This film is entirely inoffensive, and in fact, at times it is quite beautifully moving. Eli Wallach steals the entire film, playing the screenwriter who Kate Winslet meets when she switches houses with Cameron Diaz and moves to Los Angeles for 2 weeks, while Cameron moves to Surrey, England for 2 weeks for a holiday, over the Christmas holiday. And Eli Wallach plays an old Hollywood screenwriter who befriends Kate Winslet and teaches her about movies and helps her to turn her life around, or begin to turn her life around. He becomes a wonderful friend and father figure to her, and it's a really wonderful performance. And Kate Winslet is really winning in this film. It's a very easy film to watch, and I talked about it before in my original 2006 review, about how this is a glamorous movie, and it really is. When Cameron Diaz and Jude Law are on screen together, it's a really glamorous film, and these are two very glamorous actors who look beautiful looking into each other's eyes and falling into bed together. And sometimes that fantasy is enough to sell a movie, and that's certainly the case with this film. It sells this movie. The chemistry, the beauty of this group of actors is just, it's off the charts, and it's wonderful to watch. And Nancy Meyers, like I said, is an exceptionally professional director. She knows exactly how to deliver just the right beats. This is a very watchable movie, unlike Leap Year, which was impossible to watch and just filled with angry, hateful characters. This film has really wonderful, sweet characters who are easy to root for and like and enjoy. And indeed, in the Kate Winslet character, the kind of character you can easily fall in love with. The same kind of sort of for Jack Black, although it's a little bit of he's a little bit too much at times. He's a little bit too Jack Black. He's kind of got that. He does have a bit of a Mike Myers quality where he tends to do a little bit to kind of pull focus. That's just kind of his thing. Maybe it's a comedy thing. Maybe it's being a sort of a comic character thing. I don't know, but it's certainly not as bad as Mike Myers. Nothing can be quite that bad. We talked about this in the View from the Top episode, where Mike Myers just likes to do a bit of business to pull focus away from everybody else to him. Jack Black likes to do a bit of business. He's a lot more generous than Mike Myers, and he doesn't try and steal scenes or try and pull all the focus to him, but he does do his little Jack Black bits, and those do tend to call attention to him as opposed to calling attention to what the scene needs to accomplish. The film is also way too long, at over 2 hours. It doesn't need to be that long. They could have gotten this down to a more reasonable length of time, but it's still a pretty breezy and easy to watch film, because this is such a wonderful group of actors, and you enjoy watching them fall in love. It is candy. It's chocolate. It's a trifle, and it's easy to enjoy. And I've criticized a lot of other movies for being kind of like that, but those movies, I don't think they had the similar intent. I don't think they had the professionalism. I don't think they had the glamour. They don't have the fantasy. They don't have the professionalism of Nancy Meyers' direction. And say what you will about Nancy Meyers, she is a professional director. She knows how to really frame a beautiful scene and really set a story very well, and create characters that are very easy to root for. Other modern romances, they can do one or the other. They can kind of maybe get a few pretty pictures here. They can maybe create a character that you kind of like, but don't resemble any kind of person that you could actually enjoy being around. I'm looking at you, Nicholas Sparks. But but Nancy Meyers is a very professional director, and she works with a great group of actors, and everybody's really likable, and if not the least bit realistic in terms of, or practical in any way. It's a romantic fantasy. And as I was talking before about in my review, I mentioned some people's things, the Hobbits or the Force. Well, I don't see why those things are more valid than a romantic fantasy like The Holiday. I mean, they may have bigger themes and deeper, dramatic resonance, but this is as much escapist fantasy as anything else. And I don't think particularly that the Lord of the Rings movies are that great. I really don't. And the Hobbit movies, especially, I didn't think were that great. Not bad, but not great. They're escapist fantasy, and this is very similar in terms of escapist fantasy. It has a theme about love and about loss and about dealing with rejection and finding, trying to bring new people into your life, opening yourself up emotionally to new experiences. These are themes that are just as valid as any kind of hero journey and any kind of your adventure movies. And trust me, I would much rather watch The Holiday again than ever sit through another Lord of the Rings movie. Just there it is. You guys can go watch your ridiculous furry little hobbits. I'm going to watch Cameron Diaz and Jude Law and beautiful scenery, and I'm going to laugh with Kate Winslet and just absolutely fall in love with Eli Wallach, and just you guys can go wander off to Mordor or whatever the hell you do, and roll your eyes at something that is actually more than equal of the thing that you enjoy. The Holiday is truly it's not a bad movie at all. I mean, there's this reputation that it has for some reason amongst a group of, I guess, people. It's among this group that likes to see themselves as intellectuals, or it's a fashionable movie to turn your nose up at. And certainly that's something that we as critics like to do. We like to turn our nose up at things. It's part of the job. As I turn my nose up at Lord of the Rings. But it's become fashionable over the 10 years since this film came out to be hard on this movie, to be mean about this movie. And I just don't think this movie deserves it. I think it creates 5 really fantastic characters and easy to enjoy characters. It creates enough humor. Yes, it creates a number of cringe-inducing moments, too. I mean, the ending is full of cringe. Rufus Sewell's character and that whole arc there is full of cringe. Shannon Sossaman's character and that scene is all sorts of cringe. And some of Jack Black's shtick is cringeworthy. But beyond that, though, there's more than enough of the good stuff. Cameron Diaz's fumbling attempts at falling into bed with Jude Law for the first time, or Kate Winslet dancing around Cameron Diaz's house in California because she's never seen a house that big before. Those are wonderful little moments, and they're sweet. And that's why this movie doesn't deserve the kind of reputation that it has as being an inferior movie, or being a lesser movie, or being a movie that is an example of everything that is wrong with Hollywood romance. This is actually a pretty wonderful little movie because it's made by a professional director. And yes, she's recycling cliches, and yes, she's telling a very obvious story with an obvious ending. But regardless of that, it's still a very professional director making a kind of old-school Hollywood romantic fantasy that is just as valid and entertaining as any of your big sci-fi adventure movies that so many of you seem to like. And I like them too. I'm a Star Wars fan. I think Star Wars is obviously better than this in terms of its drama, but in terms of how silly it is and how much of a fantasy it is, this is just as much of a fantasy. And what's wrong with indulging either one of those fantasies? I just think people are way too hard on this movie. And that's what I'm coming away with on The Holiday. Thank you for listening to this edition of My Life as a Critic. Feel free to make all the fun that you want of me. I enjoyed The Holiday, and I'll probably watch it again before I ever watch another fantasy movie. Thank you for listening, and feel free to leave all the comments that you like.